Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. Delighted to have you with me, the Eric Erickson Show. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I'm happy to have you. Well, let's get into the events of the day and what's happening in Israel. Here is Donna Brazil on ABC News. I play this clip of her for a particular reason. She's talking to the left.
From George W. Bush. Our new poll looked at this just out this morning. U.S. responsibility in the Middle East found that 55% say the U.S. has a responsibility to fight terrorism, 53% responsibility to protect Israeli citizens, but less than a majority to ensure peace. So there's not a lot of appetite among American voters for broad U.S. involvement, but there is support, perhaps not as strong as I would have thought it would have been, but there is support for a strong U.S. support for Israel.
There's no question about it. And look, we just finished or got out. I don't know the right word, but, you know, we were in the Middle East fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I'm sure there's no appetite. And some of that is the hard partisanship we see. But more importantly, this is a moment where the American people must understand what's at stake. The hostages, including Americans. We have to understand that Israel is our ally, and yet we have to be prudent in how we use our military might and strength in that region.
This is the president of Israel.
So let's first understand what type of hostages. Who are these hostages? Babies, pregnant women, elderly people with dementia, even with their caretakers, families, innocent civilians. From 36 nations, people were killed or abducted from 36 nations. Okay, there's Natalie from Chicago who came with her mother to spend a weekend of a holiday in Nachal Oz, in a kibbutz on the border. Incidentally, a kibbutz advocating peace all throughout its history. And she's there in Gaza, and nobody knows her whereabouts, and so many other Americans and so many other people, and this living in not knowing what's their whereabouts is hell. Actually, this paradise place turned into hell, and it is our obligation to move it from being hell back to being paradise. And part of it is to bring back the hostages immediately with no conditions back to Israel. There is incidentally a big international effort on that respect. And I must say that the American administration and President Biden has been incredibly supportive. And we are utterly grateful to him, the American nation, and all our friends and supporters throughout the world.
One more bit of audio here. This is Ron DeSantis. He was making the rounds on the talk shows this weekend. So DeSantis, and we'll spend a little more time on this specifically later. DeSantis chartered a plane, I believe using campaign funds, and got it to Israel, was able to round up 300 Americans, and they landed at Tampa International Airport last night. He met the people as they came. You could say, well, it's a PR stunt. Maybe so, but it's a pretty good PR stunt. Nobody else has done this, including Joe Biden, who at best is putting Americans on boats and getting them to Cyprus and making them pay the administration for the rescue. DeSantis did this. The people who took those flights, the 300 of them, no reimbursement to the state of Florida or to DeSantis for doing it. The Biden administration making people reimburse the government. This is DeSantis on the issue of Israel and the bright lines of war.
We don't have a clear definition of success from the Israeli prime minister either. I asked the national security advisor, and he just said generally
I actually think
safety,
we do.
The Jewish state.
I think we do, with all respect. I mean, I think he has said that it is the total and complete defeat of Hamas, where they're no longer existing as a functioning entity. I think that is achievable. I think Israel can do that, and I think they have every right, and indeed, I think they have the duty to do that.
Amen. One of the things that we're hearing is this idea of proportionality. They're just war doctrines and proportionality, all these things. It's funny how they're suddenly coming back into vogue to insist that Israel engage in some level of proportionality in response to Hamas, that they don't just go in and nuke Gaza. The people who are using proportionality, though, essentially mean that Israel, that they can't use violence to stamp out Hamas. When they talk about proportionality, what they sound like they're suggesting is that Israel needs to go in and selectively kill 1,400 Palestinians, chop off the heads of 40 babies, rape a dozen women, maybe find one pregnant woman, disembowel her and her child, stab the child to death, and then kill the mother. That's what Hamas did. That's what Hamas did. I don't want to tone it down for you. You need to understand this, that it's documented evidence. It is documented that Hamas cut a child out of a woman while the mother was still alive and then killed them both. That's what Hamas did. Hamas took tires off of cars and set the tires on fire and rolled them into houses to burn down houses where they couldn't get into the safe rooms of the Jews inside, and so they burned the houses down, cooking the Jews inside. That's what they did. There's this nasty little strain of people on the left and the right who were saying, oh, it's AI-generated pictures, or it didn't really happen, or show us the beheaded babies, or else we're not going to believe you. And along the way, they say, well, there's got to be a proportional response. What do they actually mean? Here's what it actually, not what they mean, but what it actually means is, what response must Israel mount to stop this from happening again? If 5 men with guns from Gaza came across the wall, they each had 10 rounds in their magazines. So you had 50 bullets. They fired 50 bullets, and they all were gunned down and dead. Israel going into an all-out war leveling Gaza would be disproportionate. You don't bomb Gaza because 5 people came across with guns. That would be disproportionate. But this is the political regime of Gaza. Hamas is the political regime. Hamas is the government. Hamas runs Gaza. The people of Gaza elected Hamas. Hamas places its infrastructure in hospitals, schools, and mosques to maximize casualties. And then Hamas plays a game with many members of the Western media where they say, no, Israel can't respond in kind because that would be disproportional. Look at the civilians that would die. Israel just had, I want to give you this number. This number is real. It's a statistic that I'm not making up. Hamas killed 0.1% of all the Jews on planet Earth in their attack. 0.1% of all the Jews on planet Earth are dead in a weekend because of Hamas. That's a lot of people. Proportionally for Israel, that's 1,440 of its citizens. That's now 30 Americans. It went from 14 Americans to 30. There are now 199 hostages. What's the proportional response? It's to end Hamas's ability to wage war. And if that means you have to blow up buildings, including hospitals and schools in Gaza, because that's where Hamas puts its rockets, that's where Hamas puts its headquarters, that's where Hamas puts its people, so be it. Innocent Israelis died. Yes, innocent Gazans are going to die. The rules of proportionality of war do not preclude innocent people from dying. The rules of proportionality of war are the response must be merited in size and scope to stop what happened from happening again. And the only way you stop from happening what happened is you exterminate Hamas. You treat Hamas like roaches and you spray enough roach killer that they all die. And in this case, the roach killer is in the form of rockets and missiles and bullets and soldiers on the ground in Gaza. Hamas is refusing to allow Gaza residents to go south. But I want you to note the contrast that gets glossed over by all the people in the media who are taking the pro-Hamas side. By the way, did you know that if you have a reporter in Gaza, that reporter has to be blessed by Hamas? It has to be someone from Gaza who Hamas sanctions. So the BBC Gaza-based reporter is a reporter that Hamas said could be a reporter. Do you really think that person's going to give you anything other than the pro-Hamas spin? They're not, because if they do, their family's going to get killed by Hamas. The BBC has had to suspend one of its reporters. The Associated Press has had to suspend another one. Why? Because the Associated Press reporter, sanctioned by Hamas, was on Twitter talking about death to the Jews. Not exactly fair and balanced. Israel has to eradicate Hamas. Now, I want to put this all in clear perspective for you. Hamas went across from Gaza into Israel without notice, without warning, using paragliders, something they've never done before. They killed 1,440 Israeli citizens. They killed Holocaust survivors and babies. They killed women, they killed men, they killed children, they killed indiscriminately. They burned houses down where people were hiding in the houses. We now have eyewitnesses who were at the music festival where Hamas called for people to come out of hiding, that it was all over, they were safe, and when they came out, they shot them. And then there were people at the concert who laid on the ground pretending to be dead, and Hamas poured gasoline on them and set them on fire. So those who were hiding, those who were playing dead, they had to decide, flee for it and actually die or stay and be burned alive. They did it with no notice. They did it with no provocation. They did it because Hamas believes that Israel should be destroyed. Hamas's statement in its political charter is the destruction of Israel and the death of Jews. That's in their political charter. The destruction of Israel and the death of Jews is in their political charter. How did Israel respond? Israel responded by telling the residents of Gaza, you have 24 hours to get out. And days later is now telling them, hey, we're going to attack northern Gaza, so go south. It's Hamas blocking them. What do you think would have happened had Hamas said, hello, Israel, in 24 hours, we're going to invade southern Israel in the kibbutzes, and we're going to kill people? What do you think Israel would have done? One, evacuated the areas, and two, taken up arms to defend themselves, so it would have happened. But Hamas didn't do that. They sneaked over so they could maximize the death. We now have documentary evidence obtained by NBC News off the dead bodies that Hamas soldiers were instructed to attack schools and places where children would be to maximize the casualties. And the children were the least likely to fight back and would have the most traumatic impact on Israel. So kill the children. This is obtained by NBC News from the dead bodies of the Hamas soldiers. And what is Israel's response? To give people of Gaza time to leave so that they can go in and wipe out Hamas. There are already innocent dead. Israel, in responding to Hamas, there are going to be innocent Palestinians dead as well. But the reality is as well, the Palestinians elected Hamas, put them in as political power. They haven't changed anything. They haven't pushed back on Hamas, putting their weapon strongholds in schools and hospitals, putting their headquarters in schools and hospitals and mosques. Yes, there's going to be fallout, but it's because of Hamas. It's not because of Israel. No one in the Palestinian territory would be dead this week had Hamas not attacked Israel and killed 1,440 of its citizens. 0.1% of all the Jews on planet Earth are dead because of Hamas. Israel gets to respond. And the proportionality of that response is not an equivalent response. The proportional response is the response necessary to ensure this does not happen again. And the only way Israel ensures that is to eradicate Hamas from the face of the earth. And that's what they should do. Hi there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program. This is from the Wall Street Journal. The war between Israel and Hamas isn't just risking a regional conflagration. It's also affecting the global balance of power, stretching American and European resources while relieving pressure on Russia and providing new opportunities to China. The long-term effect of the Middle East flare-up is hard to predict. It depends, first of all, on whether Israel is ultimately successful in elimination of Hamas as Gaza's main military and political force. Another critical issue is whether Israel's diplomatic relationships in the region and the global standing of its Western supporters can survive the rising civilian casualties in Gaza and the looming horrors of urban warfare in densely populated enclaves. But for now, the war launched by Hamas on October 7th with a brutal attack on Israeli towns and villages that killed some 1,400 people, mostly civilians, has proven a boon for America's main geopolitical rivals. China, Russia, and Iran have long sought to undermine the U.S.-backed international system and are now taking advantage of America's distraction. Oh, you don't think this is a distraction? Let me just play you this short piece of audio from 60 Minutes last night. This is Scott Pelley characterizing Joe Biden in his interview with Joe Biden.
As we spoke to the president, his Secretary of State was in Israel. His defense secretary was at a NATO meeting on Ukraine. America's oldest president seemed tired from directing all of this.
Seemed tired. You think? We need younger leaders now with bold visions. And the GOP's got Haley. It's got DeSantis. It's got Tim Scott. It's got these great younger people with strong leadership potential who could be president, and yet we got two 80-year-olds at the top of the pack, and that's just not good as the world descends into chaos. Now, your business may have descended into tech chaos, and before you get on Google to find your answer, you can get the phone answered at Vision Computers in 15 seconds or less. That's why you should use Vision as your tech support. Listen, if you've got a bunch of computers in your office or your home and Vision's not the people who built them, they'll still be your tech support for a small annual fee. Better yet, let them build your computers, laptops, and desktops, and then be your IT department. So you don't have to have a full-time staffer at your office or even your home to handle your computers. And mom, dad, you don't have to be IT for your kids. You just get the phone number from Vision. Within 15 seconds or less, they answer the phone, and they can get you back on your way, get you up to speed, get you working again. They can remote in and fix. Sometimes they can do that, and sometimes they can tell you how to fix it over the phone. They're great. They save you money with your hardware, and they get you up and running with your software, printer support, email support, all of it. VisionComputers.com or 404-COMPUTE. Give them a call. Ask about the Eric Erickson Special. You can save even more money. Ask about the Eric Erickson Special at 404-COMPUTE or go to VisionComputers.com. Y'all want to know what real leadership looks like? The head of the Catholic Church in the Holy Land, Cardinal Per Battista Pizzaballa. I love the last name, Pizzaballa. Exactly like you think it's spelled. Pizzaballa. Pizzaballa. Per Battista Pizzaballa is the cardinal, the head of the Catholic Church in the Holy Land. He has offered himself to Hamas in exchange for the Israeli children being held hostage. Said, you can keep me, let the children go. That's leadership. Sacrificial leadership. God bless the man. I want to turn to an ancillary issue that you all know that I love, and I know you do too. I will take your phone calls, 877-973-7425, but we got to talk about this. I realize it's stringing dots together, but it's a real thing here. One of the issues we are dealing with and the fallout and rise of Iran, China, Russia, this issue with Hamas, they wanted to scuttle a deal between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the United States. They wanted to, or not Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United States, they wanted to sabotage a deal. Saudi Arabia was going to increase its oil production. That could help the American economy. That could lower oil prices. And all of this is because the United States itself has continued to resist production of more oil. It's true, we are producing record amounts of oil right now, but you have to understand why. The Obama administration refused to release a lot of oil. They refused to put the policies in place to allow oil production. Donald Trump did. And we saw an escalating pace of oil production in this country until COVID hit and it collapsed. And only now, because of the way Donald Trump structured it, Joe Biden has not been able to undo everything Donald Trump did. And we've gotten back up to where Trump was and higher. We would have been even higher still had COVID not hit. We would have been even more energy self-reliant. But the climate change zealots in the Biden administration and elsewhere have decided that they would rather China get rich than we produce our own oil. At the same time, they can't decrease oil production, because if they were to decrease oil production overall, it would drive up prices so much Biden and the Democrats would be hurt. So what they allowed to happen is for Iran to sell oil. I played you the audio the other day of Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, who has noted that they've had to balance the world's oil supply. It's by necessity. They have necessarily had to allow Iran to sell oil so that the world supply and demand would balance out, because they can't afford for the price of oil to be so outrageously high that it causes things to skyrocket, causes prices to skyrocket. That would be really bad. The result is the climate change zealots put into place the perfect storm by which Iran and China could profit from the sale of oil. We are deprived oil production in this country, and we're making China rich off the precious metals. Here is Anthony Blinken. I'm sorry, this is John Kirby, the White House spokesman. Listen to him talking to Martha McCallum.
Given that the United States is now involved in wars that are taking place in Europe and also in the Middle East, I want to play this soundbite for you that is just last month in Vietnam and ask you if this still holds for the president. Watch.
The only existential threat humanity faces, even more frightening than a nuclear war, is global warming going above 1.5 degrees in the next 10 years.
Given all the nuclear players in these two areas where we are now engaged, John, does the president stand by that comment?
Absolutely he does. Climate change is an existential threat. It actually threatens and is capable of wiping out all human life on Earth over time. I mean, I don't know how more existential you can get to that, but that doesn't mean that we walk away from our obligations, our national security interests in very dangerous parts of the world.
John,
But here's the problem. This administration is pursuing climate change policies that enrich Iran and China by restricting our production of oil from Anwar, by closing off portions of the Gulf of Mexico to oil production, by restricting pipelines, by restricting new oil refinery builds, by telling the oil companies of America that they need to be out of business in the next decade. Joe Biden is emboldening Iran, financing Iran, and emboldening China. We're strengthening China's hand with rare earth minerals and precious resources for making battery components. We're strengthening Iran by allowing Iran to make billions of dollars from China through selling oil, which, by the way, Iran is not supposed to be able to do, but we've allowed them to do it anyway, because in the words of this administration, we got to balance supply and demand. We could be picking up the supply. We could be a net exporter of oil more extensively than we are. But the Biden administration doesn't want it because of climate change. And now Michael Schellenberger has this, which is somewhat funny. This is from NBC News. No, from Bloomberg. Replacing U.S. coal plants with solar and wind is cheaper than running the coal plants. Here's the subheadline. This is from January. It now unequivocally costs less to build new renewable energy projects than to operate existing coal plants, according to a new analysis. And now, from October, from Bloomberg, New York rejects offshore wind's request to raise rates. Regulators turn down jaw-dropping proposed adjustments. Vote risks threatening the state's renewable energy goals. Why? Because it actually turns out, contrary to the January analysis, that the solar and the wind farms are more expensive than the coal plants. They lied. The wind industry needs a 54% increase in energy prices to be able to survive. The coal-powered plants did not. Time and time again, the energy proposals of this administration of the left have emboldened America's enemies, so much so that Iran made billions of dollars from China and used that money to fund Hamas. Despite all of the belly aching out there, denying that Iran is involved, denying there's knowledge, there's story after story after story after story that, Iran had no idea. Iran was out of the loop. Iran didn't support it. Iran's been funding Hamas for years. This is John Kirby and Shannon Bream. Listen to this exchange.
Well, of course, Iran is broadly complicit here. And of course, the resourcing and training they've given to Hamas has obviously helped Hamas function and be able to conduct the terrorist attacks that they have been able to conduct. We have held Iran accountable. The attacks on our troops in Iraq and Syria have greatly decreased because of our retaliatory strikes. There's the longest truce in Yemen now in place, saving literally tens of thousands of Yemeni lives. We have added military capabilities into the Gulf region, additional ships, a different aircraft.
So you've got all of these Democrats in Congress and all of these Democrats in the White House saying Iran had no knowledge. Iran was not involved. And here comes John Kirby under pressure from Sandra Bream and says, well, of course they've been helping Hamas the whole time. Of course they were complicit. How is Iran complicit? Well, this administration doesn't want us to produce oil, but it needs oil to lower gas prices for American consumers who don't want electric cars. So it had to allow Iran to sell the oil to China to lower China's demand for everyone else's oil to balance out the supply and demand curve. That then enriched Iran. Iran then used the money not to feed its people, but to fund Hamas and Hezbollah. Hamas and Hezbollah bought weapons, arms, built rockets, and bought drones, and Iran bought technology from China to build weapons for Russia to go to Ukraine. That's what happened because of this administration's policies. There is no conspiratorial tie here. It is a direct link between Joe Biden's climate change agenda and Iran's ability to make money off the sale of oil. And when Iran makes money off of oil, it doesn't use that money to take care of its people. It uses that money to advance jihad on the planet. Now, here's the worst part of it. It's easily foreseeable. That's the worst part of it. Easily foreseeable. Most every prominent voice on the right told Joe Biden this would happen. Most every prominent voice on the right predicted Iran would fund terrorism when Joe Biden turned a blind eye to their oil sales. Most every prominent voice on the right knew this would happen. But this administration and the left is so captured by the environmental activists, it doesn't matter. You know the silver lining for the left and what happened? 1,440 carbon emitters no longer emit carbon. They don't exhale carbon dioxide anymore. It's a horrible, horrible thing to think about, that the environmentalists in this country and around the world, they want population reduction on the planet. And the Biden administration policies fed into a terrorist attack that took 1,400 plus people out of breathing and exhaling carbon dioxide on this planet. And so for the environmentalists, it's okay. It's the cost of doing business. Funding Iran, funding terrorism saves the planet because we are not producing oil. And by not producing oil, by not digging for lithium in this country, by not mining for rare earth minerals, by being committed to an electric car revolution that profits China, we're benefiting Iran, we're benefiting China, we're benefiting our enemies. China, Russia, and Iran are building an axis of evil before our very eyes, and they're using our environmentalist climate change worryism to do it for them. They're using our policies to benefit themselves. We're funding billions of dollars to China for the resources necessary to buy the batteries to make the electric cars, and we're allowing Iran to produce the oil to give to China. We're profiting these countries. Our policies for climate change are enriching not our opponents, not our rivals, not our trading partners, but our enemies. And we now have a death toll in Israel because of those policies. The left will say it's conspiratorial. They'll say, "Oh, you're connecting dots crazily." They'll use the little meme of what's his name who's drawing the strings across the board. It's real. It's true. You don't have to connect the dots. It's right there before your very eyes. We allowed Iran to sell oil to China because we didn't want to produce it ourselves, but yet we needed to keep prices low. We allow China to take our money to mine the rare earth minerals, and China uses that money to build weapon systems for Russia. Iran uses the money China gives them from the sale of oil to build weapon systems for Hamas and Hezbollah and Russia. It's all because of our climate policies, because the left in this country has decided to embrace this death cult of climate. They laugh and they scoff and they deny it, and at the same time, they enact the policies that make it happen. You cannot deny what has happened. A horrible, brutal attack by Hamas, funded by Iran, off the oil sales we allowed them to give to China because we needed them to balance supply and demand concerns without us having to get our hands dirty producing oil from this country. You want to bring peace to the Middle East? You maximize oil production in the United States so we're less dependent on Saudi Arabia. We're less dependent on Iran selling oil to China. We're less dependent. We've got more energy independence in this country, and we've got a stronger national security. But the Biden administration won't do that because of the climate change alarmists. That, my friends, is a reality they don't want to grapple with. They will scream and deny it. But you know, and I know, it's the God's honest truth. Thankfully, we've got a group like Patriot Mobile out there fighting for conservative policies and conservative common sense when it comes to energy and other issues. Patriot Mobile, they're a cell phone company, and all you got to do to help them fight for the right causes is to move your cell phone business to them by going to patriotmobile.com/Eric, patriotmobile.com/ERICK. You move your business to Patriot Mobile. Patriot Mobile, as their profits grow, they fund the causes you care about. They fund the Second Amendment. They fund the pro-life movement. They fund conservative candidates. They fund conservative parents battling wokes on school boards around the country. They fund common sense conservative solutions and common sense conservative candidates. patriotmobile.com/Eric. That's where you need to go. If you call them at 972-PATRIOT. 972-PATRIOT. That's the number. 972-PATRIOT. You tell them I sent you. You get free activation with my name. You're talking to people who are 100% U.S.-based customer service. You get free activation with my name. You get great discounts. If you're an NRA member, a veteran, a first responder, a teacher, they'll give you great discounts. Got a lot of lines because you got a lot of kids. They'll give you good discounts. And then as their profits grow, they're giving you the conservative movement grows. They can even give you a new phone number or take your existing phone number and use it on their service. You get guaranteed great service using the same cell towers you're probably already using. PatriotMobile.com/Eric or 972-PATRIOT. Call them and tell them I sent you. The phone number here, if you want to be on the program, 877-973-7425. This is actually a pretty remarkably big deal. I played for you the other day Mark Rowan. Mark Rowan is he's the head of the Apollo Management. This is Mark Rowan. He blasted the University of Pennsylvania for refusing to take a bold stand against anti-Semitism. They had a huge Hamas rally on campus. The president of the university stayed silent. This is a little bit of Rowan on CNBC.
Look, there has been a gathering storm around these issues. Microaggressions are condemned with extreme moral outrage, and yet violence, particularly violence against Jews, anti-Semitism seems to have found a place of tolerance on the campus, protected by free speech. President McGill is not an anti-Semite. President McGill is just not capable of exercising moral leadership.
That's Mark Rowan. And now John Huntsman, the former governor of Utah. His family is exceedingly wealthy. He was the ambassador to Russia. He's an ambassador to China, governor of Utah, a one-time presidential candidate. He says his family will no longer give to the University of Pennsylvania, given how they've handled the situation in Israel. The university's silence in the face of reprehensible and historic Hamas evil against the people of Israel, when the only response should be outright condemnation, is a new low, he wrote President Liz McGill in an email. Consequently, Huntsman Foundation will close its checkbook on all future giving to the University of Pennsylvania. The family has donated over $50 million to the school. Huntsman is an alumnus and a former trustee. McGill finally condemned the attacks on Tuesday, but didn't describe them as terrorism, just lamented escalating violence in the Middle East. Huntsman responded to that, by the way, saying moral relativism has fueled the university's race to the bottom. It appears Penn has become deeply adrift in ways that make it almost unrecognizable. Good for these donors standing up against these Ivy League schools refusing to do the right thing. Remarkable. At Drexel, a Jewish student's room was set on fire by Hamas protesters. Goodness. Amazing this is happening in the United States. Goodness.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.